Jack had always lived a quiet, solitary life. At 50, he had already been through his share of struggles, divorce, loneliness, and the weight of a world that seemed to move on without him. He had one daughter, Lily, whom he adored, and his world revolved around her. Lily was everything to him, her laughter, her kindness, and the way she made the house feel alive again after so many years of emptiness. Lily had a best friend named Winora, a 20-year-old girl who was studying at the university. Winora often visited their house, especially on weekends, bringing an energy that Jack had long forgotten. She was bright, full of life, and had a way of seeing the world that fascinated him. Jack never thought much of it. She was just Lily's friend, after all. But over time, something shifted. It began slowly. Jack would catch her eyes lingering a little longer than necessary, or notice how her laughter seemed to make the air feel lighter. Her presence, once just a passing comfort, began to stir something deep within him. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, something he hadn't felt in years. An attraction, perhaps, or a longing. But he quickly dismissed it. After all, she was young enough to be his daughter, and she was Lily's closest friend. But as the months passed, those feelings only grew stronger, and Jack could no longer ignore them. He began to seek out moments when he could be near her, just to talk, even if it was only about trivial things. He found himself drawn to her energy, her optimism, the way she could turn the most mundane conversations into something meaningful. And though he tried to push these emotions away, a part of him couldn't help but wonder, was it possible to feel something for someone so much younger, someone so innocent? Winora, on the other hand, had always admired Jack. She thought of him as the strong, silent type, kind, thoughtful, and deeply caring. She often found herself seeking his company, especially when she needed a break from the chaos of university life. Jack had a certain calmness about him that made her feel safe, understood. She admired the way he listened, how he could see right through her words and understand what she was really thinking. It wasn't long before Winora began to notice the subtle changes in their interactions. At first, it was a lingering touch when he handed her something, then longer conversations that left them both feeling strangely connected. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond that neither could fully comprehend, but both felt deeply. One evening, when Lily was out with friends, Jack and Winora found themselves alone in the living room. The quiet of the house felt different, charged almost. They were sitting close together on the couch, talking about books they had both read, the conversation drifting between light-hearted humor and deeper, more meaningful topics. Jack found himself gazing at her a little too intently, his heart beating faster than usual. "I've always wondered," Winora said, breaking the silence, "how you ended up where you are. You seem so content, so at peace with everything." Jack looked at her, his eyes soft. "Sometimes, peace comes after years of struggle," he said, his voice low. "But even then, it's not always easy to find." Winora smiled gently, sensing the sadness behind his words. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, a small gesture, but one that felt significant. Jack tensed slightly at the contact, but he didn't pull away. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she asked quietly. He nodded, looking away for a moment. "More than you know." For a few moments, there was only the sound of their breathing, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Then, without thinking, Jack turned toward her, his gaze locking onto hers. It was as if time stood still. When Nora's breath caught in her throat, and she felt an undeniable pull toward him, something more than friendship but something too complicated to define. "Winora," Jack said softly, his voice a whisper, I don't know what's happening between us, but I can't ignore it anymore." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "I don't know what to say," she replied, her voice trembling. Jack reached out slowly, his hand brushing against hers. "I don't expect anything from you," he said, his eyes full of sincerity. "I just needed you to know how I feel." There was a long silence as Winora processed his words. She had never expected this, never thought that a man like Jack could harbor feelings for someone like her. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that her own heart had been quietly responding to his presence in ways she hadn't fully understood until now. "I don't know if this is right," she whispered, "but I think I feel the same way." Jack's heart skipped a beat at her confession. He wanted to pull her close, to tell her that everything would be okay, but he couldn't.
Not yet.
They both knew the complexities of their situation, the consequences it could have on their lives, their relationships. And yet, in that moment, neither of them could deny the bond they shared. Over the next few weeks, things between them changed. They found themselves spending more time together, talking late into the night, sharing stories, dreams, and fears. They both struggled with the feelings that had bloomed between them, knowing the world would not understand. Jack was older, experienced, and burdened with the wisdom that came with age, while Winora was young, full of hope, and searching for her place in the world. But despite the uncertainty, they couldn't let go of each other. They were drawn together by something deeper than age or logic, something that defied explanation. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was an emotional connection, a shared understanding of the quiet spaces within each other. Eventually, they both agreed that they could not live in secrecy. Their feelings had become too strong, too undeniable. It wasn't easy. It wasn't without its challenges. They had to navigate the reactions of Lily, the judgment of others, and their own fears. But in the end, they realized that sometimes love doesn't follow the rules. It doesn't care about age, status, or convention. Love just is. And in the quiet moments, when the world seemed to fade away, Jack and Winora knew they had found something special, something worth holding on to, no matter the obstacles. Their love was unconventional, but it was theirs, and that made it beautiful. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were no longer afraid to walk it together. After they confessed their feelings for each other, Jack and Winora's relationship became increasingly complicated. They couldn't deny the bond between them, but they were also aware of the consequences it could have. Jack, being 50, was aware of the age gap and the judgment that might come from society and from his daughter, Lily. Winora, despite her feelings, struggled with the idea of being in a relationship that might be seen as inappropriate by others. As time passed, their connection only deepened. They spent more time together, navigating the complexities of their emotions and the challenges that arose from being in an unconventional relationship. Jack, who had lived most of his life quietly, began to feel alive again, while Winora felt she had found someone who truly understood her. They kept their relationship a secret for a while, afraid of how Lily would react. But eventually, the weight of hiding their feelings became too much. Jack knew he had to be honest with his daughter, no matter the outcome. So, one evening, when Lily was home, Jack sat her down and explained everything. Lily was shocked at first and understandably upset. She felt betrayed by both of them, confused and hurt by the idea of her father being romantically involved with her best friend. It took time, but with patience and open communication, Lily came to understand that while the situation was difficult, it didn't change the love her father had for her. Winora and Jack, though, faced more challenges from people outside their immediate circle. Friends and acquaintances didn't understand their relationship, and both had to learn how to cope with judgment and criticism. Yet, despite the hurdles, they found solace in each other, and their love grew stronger with every passing day. Ultimately, they realized that love is not about adhering to societal norms, but about mutual respect, understanding, and deep emotional connection. They accepted the challenges they faced and embraced the love they had found, even if it was unconventional. As the months went by, their bond became more accepted by those who mattered most. Lily, after seeing how happy they made each other, came to terms with it and eventually gave them her blessing. Jack and Winora's relationship, though unconventional, became a testament to the fact that love can bloom in unexpected places and that sometimes the heart knows what it wants, regardless of age or societal expectations. Apologies for the confusion. Here's the continuation of the romantic elements of the story. As Jack and Winora's connection deepened, the moments between them grew more intimate, not just in words, but in quiet, unspoken gestures. One evening, as they sat together in the soft glow of the living room light, their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away. Jack, his heart racing, couldn't help but feel the electric pull between them. He knew it wasn't just a fleeting attraction anymore, it was something much deeper. Winora, too, felt the weight of the moment, her heart fluttering as she looked into his eyes, her breath catching in her throat. Without a word, Jack reached out to brush a stray lock of hair from Winora's face. His fingers lingered for a moment longer than necessary, and Winora, unable to resist the warmth of his touch, leaned into his hand. A soft sigh escaped her lips, and she met his gaze, her heart pounding. Jack's heart skipped a beat, and without thinking, he pulled her gently towards him. At first, their kiss was tentative, as if both were unsure of crossing that invisible line. But then it deepened, slow and tender, as if they were both savoring the taste of this forbidden love. Jack's hand moved to her back, pulling her closer, his breath mingling with hers, while Winora responded, her arms wrapping around his neck. The kiss was full of longing, of years of quiet desire that had been building silently beneath the surface. The moment was intense, but they pulled away after a few moments, both a little breathless. Neither of them spoke, but the emotions in their eyes were clear. They knew this was something undeniable, something that neither of them could ignore any longer. From that moment on, their stolen moments became more frequent. They found themselves sneaking touches, fingers brushing as they passed each other, hands lingering a little too long on shoulders or arms, their eyes always meeting with that spark of desire and something deeper. They shared quiet conversations, sitting close together, talking about their hopes, their fears, and the longing they both carried within them. One night, as they sat together on the couch, the room filled with a soft hum of music in the background, Jack gently placed his hand on Winora's cheek, his thumb brushing over her soft skin. "I never thought I would feel this way again," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "But with you, everything feels right, like we were meant to find each other." Winora's heart swelled with emotion. She gazed up at him, her eyes shining. "I never imagined this would happen either, Jack. But it feels like I've always known you, like I was always meant to be here with you." And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet warmth of the room and the unspoken bond between them, they both knew that despite the world's judgment, despite the age difference, they had found something real, something worth fighting for. Their love, though unconventional, was powerful and pure, a connection neither of them could deny. As the days passed and their bond grew stronger, the subtle, quiet moments between Jack and Winora began to change. What had started as a friendship rooted in shared conversations and mutual respect slowly evolved into something deeper, something both of them tried to ignore but couldn't. The air between them began to shift, charged with an electric tension that neither could deny. One evening, when Lily had gone out with friends, Jack and Winora found themselves alone in the house again. The living room was dimly lit, the soft glow from the fireplace casting dancing shadows across the walls. They sat close together on the couch, talking about trivial things at first, books they had read, movies they had enjoyed, but the words seemed to fade as they both grew more aware of the closeness between them. The first touch. It started with a simple gesture. Jack accidentally brushed his hand against Winora's as they reached for the same book on the coffee table. For a moment, neither of them pulled away. Winora felt a sudden warmth rush through her at the contact, a feeling that was both foreign and familiar. Her heart skipped a beat. Jack, too, felt the spark. His hand, which had started to pull back instinctively, lingered, and his fingers gently grazed hers again. Winora looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. Their eyes locked, both of them caught in a moment of hesitation. Jack felt the urge to say something, but words seemed to fail him. His heart pounded in his chest. Slowly, he withdrew his hand, but the quiet tension between them remained, thick in the air. Neither of them spoke, yet neither wanted to move. The first kiss. That night, after a long conversation, Jack stood up to leave, feeling the weight of his growing feelings for her. Winora stood with him, walking him to the door as she had done many times before. But this time, something was different. As Jack reached for the door handle, Winora stepped closer to him. The space between them closed, and she hesitated, then spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Jack, do you think this is all wrong?" Jack turned to face her, his heart racing. He saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the uncertainty, but also something else, something deeper. His voice was barely a whisper as he replied, "I don't know, but when I'm with you, it feels like it's right." Winora took a deep breath, and before she could stop herself, she leaned in, her lips brushing against his. The kiss was gentle at first, as though neither of them wanted to break the fragile balance they had been holding on to. But then, it deepened, as though both of them were giving in to the emotions they had been suppressing for so long. Jack's hands, which had remained at his sides, now reached up to gently cradle her face. When Nora's hands found their way to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. As their kiss grew more passionate, the world around them seemed to disappear, leaving only the warmth of their embrace and the shared breath between them. When Nora felt her heart pounding in her chest, the realization of what was happening overwhelming her, yet thrilling her at the same time. The moments after, when they finally pulled away, both were breathless, their faces inches apart. Jack, looking into Nora's eyes, saw a mix of emotions, fear, longing, and something that could only be called affection. He reached out, brushing his thumb over her cheek. "I don't want to hurt you, Winora," he murmured softly. She smiled faintly, her voice trembling. "I don't think you could." For a long moment, they stood there in the hallway, neither moving, neither speaking, just absorbing the intensity of what had just passed between them. The secret touches and late-night talks. In the weeks that followed, their moments together grew more intense, though they were still cautious, trying to keep their growing feelings hidden. Yet, in private, the tension continued to build. Every time Jack would walk into the room, Winora would feel a flutter in her stomach. Every time their hands brushed, it felt like an unspoken promise. On one particular evening, they found themselves alone again, sitting in the living room. The silence between them was filled with unspoken words. Jack reached for his glass of wine but accidentally knocked it over. As he bent down to clean it up, Winora instinctively reached out, her hand brushing against his. The touch was electric and they both froze. Jack looked up at her, his eyes dark with emotion. Slowly, he stood up, moving closer to her. His voice was a soft whisper, "I can't keep pretending like nothing is happening between us." Winora didn't say anything, but she looked up at him, her eyes filled with the same desire, the same need. She stepped toward him, closing the gap between them. Without thinking, Jack cupped her face in his hands, gently tilting her head upwards. Their lips met again, but this time, the kiss was more urgent, more desperate. It wasn't just a kiss of affection anymore. It was a kiss that spoke of all the things they couldn't say aloud. They stumbled back toward the couch, Jack gently lowering her as they kissed, his hands trailing down her back, pulling her closer to him. Winora, her hands trembling, moved her hands to the back of his neck, drawing him closer, as if there was no distance left between them. They pulled apart, breathless, both of them gazing at each other with a mix of fear and longing. "Are we doing the right thing?" Winora whispered, her voice shaking. Jack, his chest rising and falling with each breath, looked at her with soft eyes. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but it feels real. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like I'm not alone." And so, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, they both knew that their feelings for each other had grown beyond friendship. They had crossed a line that neither of them could go back from, and in that moment, they realized that they would have to face whatever came next, together. The final step. Eventually, the feelings between them could no longer remain a secret. They began to steal moments whenever they could, soft kisses in the quiet of the night, lingering touches during quiet conversations, and whispered words of affection when no one else was around. Each moment was a reminder that despite the world outside, despite the odds, they had found something real in each other. Though their love was unconventional, and though the road ahead was uncertain, they both knew one thing for sure. they had found something rare, something worth holding on to. Their relationship, tender and passionate, was a journey of self-discovery and courage, a love that blossomed despite the world's expectations, a love that they had both secretly longed for, and now they were willing to embrace fully.